Okay, today we're going to go over intake manifold removal and cleaning for your 96 through 2000 Ford Contour. This applies to the SVT and the SE with the 2.5 liter V6. This is also the same for the Mercury Cougars with the V6. Okay, usually what I like to start off with first is removing all your vacuum lines on the back side. You have one here for your brake booster. It just pops right out. And then you have a main one here, goes into the intake manifold. Take the one off of the EGR valve. And then there's two of them back here that are coupled together. You just slide those right off the back side right here. Undo your plug. And plug for your idler control valve. You also unplug throttle position sensor and remove your lines from your intake. You need a flathead screwdriver just to remove the clamps. You have a total of 3 lines going into your intake. Factory intake is the same way. You have one coming off the valve cover on the front side, one coming off of the valve cover on the back side underneath here, and one that goes to the idle air control valve. Next, you'll want to take off your intake from your throttle body. Just slide that out of the way. Okay. After that, you can take care of removing your throttle linkage from the throttle body and the linkage bracket from the intake manifold. The bracket is held on with 2 8mm bolts. One up top here, one underneath here, and there's a 10mm nut on the bottom side at the throttle body. To get your throttle linkage off, you're going to open the throttle body manually with your hand and just kind of take the linkage up and around, and it just slides right out. Alright, once your throttle linkage is off and out of the way, you can take care of unbolting your EGR valve from your intake manifold. These are held on with 2 10mm bolts. Make sure you catch your gasket on the back side there. Alright, now that that's undone and everything else is out of the way, pretty much all you have to do is remove your 6, 10, or 8mm bolts that hold your intake manifold on. the intake manifold is now loose. Alright. Now pretty much all you have to do is grab it, pay attention to your lines back here, make sure nothing gets caught. These plastic lines here are made out of plastic. They get extremely brittle from the heat, so they do break very easily. Alright, and then also one more thing. Your PCV valve is down underneath here, and you got to make sure that is all popped off. There's a quick disconnect for one line, then the PCV valve pops straight up. You can see that there. You just lift your intake manifold, just kind of work it around. And that's how you get the upper intake manifold off. Now, remove your gaskets. And now it's time to tackle the lower intake manifold. Alright, so this is where they get different between your 98s and older and your 99 or 98 and a halves and newer. This is a 2000, so this has a returnless fuel system. So you only have one fuel line going into the fuel rail. Your return style will have two lines that you'll have to disconnect. There's a quick disconnect here. For mine, I usually just unbolt it right here. It's a little bit easier for me. So what we'll have to do is remove the wiring harness, remove the fuel rail, and take out the bolts, and it pops right out. Okay, you'll see me removing zip ties from my wiring harness. That's because the connectors, the tabs break on them. Very common issue on these. Just by using some zip ties to hold the harness in place will keep them from popping out. I wasn't a huge fan of doing that at first, but it works. Just get the harness out of the way. Some things unplugged here. Your IMRC is underneath this cover here, which is held on with 3 7mm bolts. I'll just remove this to show you where it's located. So underneath this cover, you'll see these 3 points here. This is where your IMRC will bolt up to. It'll have a cable also coming off of it that goes over here to the lower intake manifold for your secondaries. So that's one step I won't be able to show you, but that cable does come around here. You'll just have to unhook it pretty much the same way as you do the throttle body. All right, very important. Before you remove the line for your fuel system, make sure you depressurize the fuel system. Easiest way to do that is remove your fuel pump relay and just start the car, and it'll run itself out of fuel. That'll relieve all the fuel pressure in the system. It'll prevent any fuel from just shooting out of the fuel rail, shooting you in the face. It's the safest way to do it. Now that we get this all off and out of the way, we can remove the lower intake manifold. Again, 8mm bolts. Should be 8 of these all together. Alright, once you get all your bolts out, you should be able to just grab a hold of the manifold and lift it up out of the car. And you can remove your old gaskets, which they're held in with little tabs, so sometimes it takes a little bit of working to get them out. You can see little tabs here and here. They go into the holes here and here. Same thing for the back head. Just grab a hold of it and pull it out. And that's all there is. And that's all it takes to get your upper and lower intake manifolds out of your V6 Contour and Cougar. Now I'm going to go over cleaning your lower and your upper intake manifold. What you're going to need is some sort of carb cleaner. I like to use Seafoam, and then also a nylon brush set. You can get these at Harbor Freight. I just picked this up today for right around $5. These work great for cleaning the carbon out of there. They come in various sizes for any of the ports you may need to clean. Today I'm going to end up showing you how to clean all your main ports, and then also your EGR passages and your idle air control valve. First, we'll start off with the lower intake manifold. You can see it's not terribly dirty. This motor was just put together at the beginning of the year, and everything was clean at that point. So it shouldn't take much more than a little bit of a wipe down, a little scrub with the brush. Pretty much what you'll want to do, stick your brush down in the Seafoam. And just work your way through every single port. See, we're starting to get some of the dirt out already. Here you'll see all the ports cleaned up. After you scrub them all, brush them all out. And you want to make sure you clean your gasket surfaces as well. To remove your idle air control valve with the intake manifold off of the car, you just need to remove the two 10mm bolts. Okay, and then there's a gasket there. And also, to make cleaning this out easier, you'll want to remove the throttle body. These are also 10mm bolts. Alright, so looking in there, you can see this is pretty clean yet. EGR passage here, you got some carbon buildup, but but that's overall not horrible. See over here in this EGR passage, there's also some dirt, or there's also some carbon in there as well. Idler control, there is some dirt in there as well, which we will have to clean out. Also, before you flip over your intake manifold, remove these little gaskets, spacers, whatever the hell you want to call them, because they'll just fall all over the place, and you don't want to lose them. Okay. For cleaning these, you'll want to get your longer nylon brush. Want to dip it in your seafoam and just work your way in through there. You'll see this comes all the way in through here, which I don't know if you can see that on the video or not, but you'll see that that comes all the way through. And this one goes in this way to your tube. Both will get clogged up. You need to make sure you clean out both the best that you can. To gain better access, you can remove this tube. Or you can just be lazy like me and work it in through there. Which you can see here, it does get all the way through. To remove these tubes, there's a little black ring around them. You just have to push down on those and then lift up, and these pop right out. It's a good idea to get those out of the way too so you don't break them. They are hard to come by. Now, fortunately, these passages don't really get too carboned up. Now what we'll want to do is clean our main passages underneath here. Now, if you're working on concrete like I am, it's not a bad idea to lay down some rags just so you don't scratch up your intake manifold, especially if you have it painted or powder coated. It can chip or scratch the paint. And what you can do, pour a little seafoam in each port. Alright, you can get some of your bigger brushes here. You can work them around inside the port. You just dump all the seafoam right out into a waste bin. That's where things will get a little messy when you're dumping it out, because you have so many ports and just holds so much fluid in here. You'll find it dripping out of all of your different holes and everything. Just try to pay attention to what you're doing. Make sure you get it all in your waste bucket, or else you'll end up making a big mess. Once you get it all dumped out, wipe out your ports, the best you can. And also wipe off anything you get on your powder coat or your paint. Just clean it up a little bit, make it look good. And keep it from eating your paint off. Okay, now last thing we want to take care of here is your EGR passages. Again, you want to take your thin nylon brush and just work it in to your EGR passage. This will take a bit of force to get it back in there, especially if it's carboned up. Another trick you can use is a piece of choke cable and a drill, and just work it in there nice and slow. And it'll clean all your carbon out. Another way to check to make sure that that is clear, if you have an air compressor, put an air chuck on there and blow air through and make sure it comes out on this side here. See how that comes out? That's how you know everything's clear. It's not a bad idea to do that for all your passages, just to make sure all of your cleaner is out. That way you don't have it all just pouring right into the motor. If you do let too much go into the motor, you will hydrolock it. With any luck, you'll be able to pull your spark plugs out and crank the motor over, shoot all the fluid out of your cylinders, and then you should be able to start the car then after that. But don't do that on purpose by any means. You can damage the internals, you can bend a rod. And then you're looking at doing a 3-liter swap earlier than you planned. Or if you already have a 3-liter, well, you're looking at putting another one in. And most of you guys probably don't want to do that more than once. Alright, now with everything clean, you want to make sure that your gasket surface is clean. And now it's time to put everything back together. Okay, time for installation. Make sure you always use new gaskets. These have a common issue where the lower ones will leak, the upper ones will leak, and it's no fun doing the job twice. Okay, next you'll want to set your lower intake manifold down on. And put in your bolts. Now these bolts get tightened down to 88.5 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds. That also translates over to 10 Newton meters. You'll want to get them started before you start using a ratchet, just to make sure they start nice and straight. You don't want to cross anything because it's no fun having to put in Healy coils and heads. crisscross as you tighten them. You'll notice that I'm not going full tight. Now you grab your torque wrench and you tighten it down to 88.5 inch-pounds. Now you can install your upper intake manifold gaskets. You'll also want to install your wiring harness for your fuel injectors. Now your fuel injectors, they can turn, and they possibly will. They probably will. Just make sure you get them all plugged in. Now the upper gaskets also have the tabs to line them up and hold them in place. You'll also want to hook up your fuel rail. Now if you do it the way I do it, make sure you lube up this O-ring before putting it back in. I just like to use a very little bit of white lithium grease. Just smear it around on there a little bit. That'll help it slide together. Nice and easy. Now you can put your bolts in. If you happen to lose that O-ring, it's just a regular fuel injector O-ring that you can put in there. When you tighten that up, just make it snug. There's no torque spec on that. Plug in your sensor for your fuel rail. And then for me, I'll end up putting my zip ties around the harness, and then we can put the upper intake manifold on. Okay, now it's time to install the upper intake manifold. Just lift it up. You want to fish it around the EGR valve the same way as taking it off. It pretty much just drops right into place. And then put your bushings in that we took out during the intake manifold cleaning. And now we want to put the bolts in. Just get them started by hand, just like you did with the lower intake. Now these get torqued down to the same torque spec, 88.5 inch-pounds. Before you get it tightened down, you also want to make sure that your PCV valve is in place. There's a little elbow down here that it slides into. Once your manifold is tightened down the whole way, it is a pain to get it in and out. It can be done, but it's easier to do it with the manifold loose. Again, crisscross on that. Get your torque wrench, tighten everything up. Alright, now that that's done, now we're putting everything else back together that we had apart. So we need to attach our EGR valve. Use a new gasket. Don't do as I do. Do as I say. What you want to do is stick one ear of the EGR valve gasket behind. Just fish your first bolt through. Line everything up. Get your bolt started. Grab your second bolt. Push it up into place. And get your second bolt started. Again, start these by hand. They should thread in nice and easy. If it doesn't go in easy, chances are you have it cross threaded a little bit. Back the bolt back out. Make sure you get it started straight. Okay, so you want to tighten this up now. Again, you don't need to worry about a torque spec on these. Just make sure they're nice and tight, but not too tight. This is an aluminum manifold, so you can strip it out. What you'll want to do is hook up your throttle linkage. There's also a line back here that goes to your TCV valve. Make sure that's hooked up. Put all your bolts in for your bracket for your throttle linkage. And get them tightened down. You want to hook up your vacuum lines. You have your one for your EGR. You have two back here. And then you have your main one here. Which just snaps right back into your intake manifold. And this slides right in. And then for your brake booster, again, just snaps right in. Pops right into your booster. Don't forget about your plugs back here for idle air control valve and for your evac system, which is what these vacuum lines back here are for. And sometimes it does fall down in here. Gets to be a little bit of a pain to find if you don't keep track of it. It is, just snaps right in. Now we can hook up our intake tube. Don't forget your clamp. electric screwdriver. Hook up your breather for your idler control valve. And your breathers from either valve cover. Throttle position sensor. And your IMRC cover. All there is left to do is clean up all your tools and fire up the car. Make sure it runs the way it's supposed to. So that's how you remove and replace your upper and lower intake manifold gaskets, do your cleaning, and put everything back together. As you can see, it is a very simple process. Just basic hand tools, brushes, ratchet, a couple of sockets, a torque wrench. I mean, just extremely simple. Just a little time consuming. Overall, I'm into this thing maybe an hour, and that's with making the video and answering some phone calls here at work. So if I were to do this without recording, no interruptions, quite honestly, it would only take me about 20 to 25 minutes. Like I said, very, very simple. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, be sure to subscribe. Have a great day.